It's my pleasure to welcome Congressman John Lewis. And Congressman, before we went on the air, we were talking about this new book by Malcolm Gladwell, who talks about how essentially the little guy, it's called David and Goliath, overcomes all odds to defeat, the favored opponent. And he talks about, he has a couple chapters on the civil rights movement. And essentially what he was saying was that the peaceful resistance that took place by Martin Luther King and others, yourself included, during the civil rights era, was a strategy that you invested in and lived by, knowing that eventually that strategy would pay off against the great, Southern establishment, hoping that the peaceful non-resistance would cause the media and the rest of the country to take notice and overcome, the odds of fighting the giant of the Southern establishment. My words.
Well,
Yeah.
He is exactly right. Long before we did any action or participated in any direct action, we studied. We prepared ourselves. We studied the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. We read and learned as much as possible about the work of Gandhi, the teaching of Thoreau and civil disobedience. We studied the great religions of the world. We studied what Martin Luther King Jr. as students, as young people, and Rosa Parks was all about in Montgomery. And many of us grew to accept the way of nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living. We have what we call social drama, role playing for a group of young people, black and white college students and high school students who play the role of the opposition. So, and we took into account the role that the media could play in helping to educate and inform and sensitize the larger community. We took into account the days when we should protest, even the hours. If we wanted to get something on the national news, we grew up overnight while we were marching, while we were sitting in or sitting down on lunch counter stools. And we believed that we were going to be successful.
There's that scene in the movie The Butler where exactly what you're referring to took place at the lunch counter stools when they came in, they sat down, and the Southerners would come in, spit at them, beat them, and they were just staying calm and cool and taking it. Was that an accurate portrayal?
Very, very accurate. I remember on so many occasions as a student in Nashville, Tennessee, a group of us would go downtown and sit down. And this happened on February 27, 1960. More than 100 college students, black and white, in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion. Just be sitting there, some looking straight ahead, others working on a paper or reading a book. And someone would come up and actually spit on us or put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs.
You had hair at that time.
I had a lot of hair during those.
Okay.
Had a lot of hair
Yeah.
during those days.
Yeah.
I was very young, and they would start beating us, pulling us off the lunch counter stools, and then the local authorities would arrest us. 'Cause I had been told, like so many Southerners, don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble. I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, and why those signs? And they would say, boy, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But the teaching of the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence and the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and so many others inspired us to get in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble, and that's what we did. And on that particular day, 89 of us were arrested. And I got arrested the first time. I felt so free. I felt so liberated. I felt like I had crossed over.
How many times have you been arrested?
But during the 60s, I was arrested 40 times. During my stay, and since I've been in Congress.
You've been arrested as a congressman.
Yes.
Yeah.
5 times. I got arrested just recently, a few weeks ago. 8 members of Congress and 200, more than 200.
That was an immigration issue?
Yes. We, a group of us, had a large rally on Capitol Hill, and then we decided to walk down and tie up traffic to try to dramatize the issue and put pressure on the majority in the House to bring before the Congress an immigration bill.
And I don't want to minimize getting arrested for that, but there has to be a big difference when you get arrested as Congressman John Lewis in 2013 and compared to John Lewis in the 60s getting arrested the first few times that you got arrested. When you were probably thrown in a cell with, 60, 80, 70 other people. You're probably beaten on the way in and on the way out, probably ridiculed. A little bit different than how you got arrested recently.
Well, it's a big difference. As members of Congress, they're very nice, very kind to you.
They put handcuffs on you?
They just put a little piece of plastic, put your hand behind your back, and put some plaster. They didn't put these metal handcuffs that we had during the 60s. And they kept on saying, I'm sorry we're doing this. And most of the police officers, they wouldn't want me to say this, but they were smiling and said, I agree with you.
Right.
But they had to carry out that responsibility.
Yeah.
But during the 60s, we were beaten. We were put in overcrowded, very stuff and very dangerous places, especially in places like Mississippi during the Freedom Rides in 1961.
How does one do that? How does one have the courage to be beaten repeatedly, broken, cracked ribs, beaten in the skull, in the head, punched, bottles thrown at you, rocks, baseball bats, and just not run?
Well, you come to that point where you see something that is so wrong, so unfair, and you say to yourself, you have what I call an executive session with yourself. So, not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to be afraid. The fear is gone. When we were marching across that bridge on March 7, 1965, that became known as Bloody Sunday, I thought we would be arrested and taken to jail. I didn't have any idea as we met the state troopers that they would start beating us, bullwhipping us, tramping us with horses, and releasing the tear gas. But we had something deep down in telling us that we had to be witness to the truth. People couldn't register to vote simply because of the color of their skin. And we wanted to change that. And so the American people, through the press, they saw what was happening. These young people, these ministers, these housewives standing there peacefully. You have a right in America to peacefully assemble, to peacefully protest. We weren't engaging in violence. We didn't have any weapons. And the people demanded action. They couldn't take it. There was a sense of righteous indignation when they saw what happened to us. I had a fractured skull there. I thought I was going to die on that bridge. But somehow, in some way, I survived.
So you had a fractured skull. They took you off to jail, or they take you to the hospital?
Well, somehow, in some way, I made it back to a church.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And I don't recall how I made it back. Apparently someone took me to the church. There was thousands of people inside of the church, more than 2,000 on the outside, trying to get in to protest what had happened. And they asked me to say something to the audience. And I stood up and said, I don't understand it. How President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam, but cannot send troops to Selma, Alabama to protect people who only desires to register to vote. And the next thing I knew, I was being transferred to a little hospital in Selma where a group of non-protected and took care of us and healed us.
What characteristics does a man need to reach so deep to have that kind of courage? And because you talk about hundreds and thousands of protesters, but it wasn't always like that. I mean, oftentimes it was a handful of you guys.
Well, you go through training, you prepare yourself, you discipline yourself. You do have what I call over and over again an executive session with yourself. You just don't start talking back to yourself. You just say, I'm going to adhere to the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence, and I'm going to accept the way of peace, the way of love, as a way of life, as a way of living. And you have to be trained to say to the person that is beating you, to the person that is placing you under arrest, making eye contact, looking at that person, and saying, that person is human, I'm human. And you have to even respect that person's dignity. Say, how can someone be so violent or be so vicious or be so mean or to hurt another human being?
When you made the statement earlier that the first time you got arrested, it was the freest moment of your life, what did you mean by that?
Because, well, first of all, I've been told, don't get in trouble with the law.
Right.
I got in trouble, and
you survived it.
I survived, and I said to myself, what else can you do to me? Arrest me again? Throw me in jail again? And so over and over I went, because there come a time you have to bear witness to the truth. You have to do what you can. Use your body, your being, as a nonviolent tool, as a nonviolent instrument to inspire, to educate, to motivate, to change a fellow human being.
When you went to school, you took religion classes, right? Didn't you graduate with a degree in
religion and philosophy?
Did you want to be a minister?
I wanted to be a minister,
yeah.
But when I was much younger, growing up on a farm in Alabama, it was my responsibility to care for the chickens, and I fell in love with raising chickens, and I wanted to be a minister so badly. With the help of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, and they will help make up the audience, the congregation. And my brothers and sisters and cousins would line the outside of the chicken yard. And so I used to talk to the chickens. I used to preach to them, and they became my first flock.
And they showed up.
And they showed up.
Each sermon, right?
They never quite said amen, but I tell you one thing, they tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. And some of those chickens was just a little more productive.
You've been in the Congress now. This is your 14th term, 28, 29 years in Congress. It's a long time. You've served with a lot of presidents. Who's been your favorite president?
Well, I served with a lot of presidents. I served with President Reagan for 2 years, and then Bush won. And I served with President Clinton for 8 years. I knew him long before he became president. I call him brother, and sometimes I become embarrassed saying to the president, brother. But we became good friends, wonderful friends. Long before I went to Congress, I met President Kennedy on 2 occasions. And from time to time, I was trying to see Kennedy in some of the presidents because he inspired me. He inspired even before he became president during the campaign. And people like President Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. inspired us to go out there and push that you can do it. You can change things. And now to serve with President Obama, to see this young man, he's having a difficult time and a hard time right now, but he also inspired me.
Originally, you were supporting Hillary Clinton in when the primaries first began. Then you changed your mind. I think it was early in 2008, and it's through your support to President Obama. That must have been difficult for you because you just said you had a relationship with Bill Clinton, a good relationship, and you had a dilemma, I would assume.
It was tough. It was a very tough and hard decision. One of the toughest decisions I ever made in my life. But at the moment, at the time, I felt that I had to be consistent, and it was one of these moments in history. But I think I will have another opportunity.
To support Hillary.
To support Hillary, and stay with her and stick with her. She's probably today in America is the most qualified person to be president of the United States.
Yeah. She has. She's seen and been involved in a lot of it.
Yes.
Yes. And you have seen so much. And when you trace back through the history of your life, and you look at where you were as a young man, growing up on that farm, getting involved in the politics of the civil rights movement, living through the civil rights movement. Now we have a black president. How do you analyze where we are as a country today when it comes to civil rights, racism? Do you think Obama is getting a bad shake because of some racism, or what is your take on this?
I really hate to think that in spite of all of the changes, in spite of all of the progress that we've made, that this president, because he's a person of color, is being treated the way he's been treated. If my mother was still around, she called me Robert, my middle name. She would say Robert. President Obama has been called everything but a child of God. That's what she would say. But I think in America today, it's not just President Obama. There's a tremendous amount of fear on the part of the majority. The country's changing. The world is changing. In a matter of a short time, the minority will be the majority. Mm-hmm. And we need to embrace the changes. People need to realize that we want America, that we want people. And it doesn't matter whether we're black or white or Latino or Asian American or Native American. We're one. And we got to learn to live together, as Dr. King would say, that we will perish as fools. We're brothers and sisters. We're all part of the same family. And I think there's been this attempt for some people to continue to divide people. You hear people say, we want to take our country back. Back where? We don't want to go back. We want to go forward.
Yeah, the good old days are not really good old days.
They're not good old days,
yeah.
no.
Yeah. So what do you think? Is it going to take another generation?
I think this generation and the people that are coming along, the young people, the youth, they give me so much hope. They're so smart, they get it. And they will lead us to another place. And maybe if they do it right, America could emerge as a model for the rest of the world.
How different are we then, when you say the rest of the world? I mean, there's countries where civil rights issues are not issues in certain countries around the world. In other countries, it's like America 200 years ago. Where do we fall in that hierarchy?
We have changed. We have made a lot of progress. And sometimes I hear people say nothing has changed. And I said, nothing has changed. And I sort of said, well, come and walk in my shoes.
Yeah.
This country is a different country than the one I grew up in, than the one that I was born in. When I was growing up in Alabama and working in Mississippi, in Georgia, and all across our country, you can feel racism. You can see it almost with your naked eye. We're not there yet, but as a nation and as a people, we're on our way, and there won't be any turning back.
This year you've been very vocal about not only immigration but also health care. I have one of my daughters is pretty ill, and for me it's been a godsend, Obamacare. Because she's 25 and she could stay on, on my insurance policy until she's 26. The $1 million limit that used to be on health care we would have exceeded a long time ago, and she's still covered under that, and she would never be able to get insurance under the old pre-existing condition requirement. So I'm very thankful for it, but a lot of people aren't. What do you say to them?
I think the Affordable Care Act, some people would call it Obamacare.
Yeah, I'm proud to call it Obamacare.
Yeah.
I think he should.
That
and hold his head high. Yes.
That he cares.
Yes.
Somebody cares.
Yeah.
That we have a president that cares.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that health care is a right, and it's not a privilege for the fortunate few. I supported it. I voted for it. I spoke up for it on the House floor. When I was growing up, we never saw a doctor. We didn't have health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
We
So
couldn't afford it.
What would you do when you were injured and growing up on the farm?
Well, we didn't have insurance. We would get some alcohol and something. My grandmother, aunts, and my mother would patch us up, tie some rags or strings around us, and we got colds. They gave us different type of oil, but we didn't see a doctor. We didn't see a dentist. I'm thankful. I'm grateful. I am blessed that hundreds and thousands and millions of people who never had an opportunity to be able to see a doctor. I don't like this idea of people saying, when I was growing up, when someone passed on, they say it was their time. No. Mm-hmm. They didn't have health insurance. They never saw a doctor.
Right. You've been the recipient of so many awards and acknowledgments. What's the one that's dearest to your heart?
I feel more than lucky. I feel very blessed. The award that I receive is an honor. It's those invisible ones. It's not the honorary degrees or the Medal of Freedom from the President of the United States. It's all right to get the degrees from the colleges and university and for people to honor them. But the blessing of meeting unbelievable people who have taught me unbelievable lessons. To get to know Fannie Lou Hamer in the Delta, Mississippi, or to meet Rosa Parks when I was 17, or to meet Martin Luther King Jr. when I was 18. I wrote Dr. King a letter. When I was 17 years old, I didn't tell my father, my mother, any of my teachers. I told him I needed his help. He wrote me back and sent me a round-trip Greyhound bus ticket and invited me to come to Montgomery to meet with him.
And what was that like the first time you met him?
Oh,
Were you nervous?
I was very nervous. It was like, I'm in the presence of this man. He had emerged as my hero, my inspiration, and to meet him, I remember walking into this little office and he said, "Are you the boy from Troy? Are you John Lewis?" And I said, "Dr. King, I'm John Robert Lewis." I gave him my whole name. And he started calling me the boy from Troy. And we became friends. He was my leader, my inspiration.
And when people talk about him now, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of, less than positive stories that some people have. How does that affect you?
Well, I knew the man, and I don't accept the rumors. I know the good that he did. I know he freed not just a group of people, but he helped free and liberate a nation. And I want to see the good things that he did and said.
Who do you look to now as the up-and-coming youth to carry the torch? Anybody in particular?
Well, there are hundreds and thousands of young people out there. I run into them all the time. They're black, they're white, they're Latinos, they're Asian American, Native American. They are so smart, they're so gifted, they know how to use this new technology.
Yeah.
See, we didn't have a website. We never heard of the internet
Of course. Yeah.
during the 60s.
You have one now? Do you use it?
Well, I'm learning. I'm learning. My staff is teaching me, my son is teaching me, but I'm far, far behind. And to see, if we had had all of this, just think, we didn't have a cellular telephone during the 60s. We didn't have a fax machine. We had an old mimeograph machine. But we were able, through these limited resources, to bring about what I call a nonviolent revolution. A revolution of values, a revolution of ideas. And because of that, I think our country's a better country. Yeah. And sometimes I point to those signs that I saw, they're gone. And they will not return. The only places our children and their children will see those signs that say white only, colored only, will be in a book, in a museum, on a video.
Mm-hmm. We only have about a minute left, but I wanted to ask you, how's our Congressman Steve Horsford doing?
Oh, Steve Horsford doing very, very well. He's just good. He is good. He's smart, he's able, and he works very, very hard, really. He's out there fighting the good fight. Yeah. I must tell you, I miss Shelley.
Yeah.
I miss Shelley Berkeley. She was my friend, and she still is my friend.
Yeah, we all miss her. Thank you so much, Congressman John Lewis. Hope you're around for another 14 terms.
Well, thank you, sir.